Hey Cougars, it's Mr. Franklin. In this video, we're going to talk about the feedback for the week of 118 to 122, which would be last week, depending on when you're watching this. So first, all right, let's take a look at mean, median, and mode. I just found it's not a mistake, but something that was omitted from our explanation that might have been that was probably the source of confusion. The median is the middlemost number. So if you have a true middle, so 5, 4, 3, so there's 1, 2, 3 numbers, and then 1, 2, 3 numbers. So this is the most middle. So it's just 3. That's the median. That's it. Okay. The only time you add and then average them is if there's 2 middle numbers. So this time there's 6 numbers instead of just 5. So 1, 2, 3, and then count from the other end, 1, 2, 3. And there's basically the middle is in between. So in a sense, we have 2 middle numbers. That's when you add and then divide by 2. So that's where some of the confusion is coming in. If that was 2, the middle bit would be 3 plus 2, which would be 2.5. Okay, that's the only time you do the average is if there's 2 middle numbers. If both the middle numbers are the same number, the average is going to be the same number. Okay, so what is the most middle number? So be careful of that one. I think that is the number one mistake made at the top of this because everybody else mostly did everything correctly. If your numbers are off, make sure you're using a calculator. Do not try to do this by hand. One part of me secretly loves that you do that, but don't use a calculator. You can use the calculator on your phone. You can use Desmo's scientific calculator. The next most missed thing at the top of this is people are not reordering their numbers. So when you get a set of numbers, to find the median of the set of numbers, you have to reorder them in order from lowest to highest. So we actually have to reorder them from lowest to highest. So start here at the beginning, Command C, and copy it. And then I would go to the next one, Command C, and copy it. When we get to the one that's not in order, I'm going to go and I'm going to put it in the right place. Okay. So I write them down in order. If I'm doing this by hand on paper, what I actually do is I leave space between the numbers. So like when I write this on my composition book, I might leave that much space between each number because I'm handwriting it and I can't hit the space bar on notebook paper. So I leave space between them so that I can squeeze any numbers in between. Okay. So when I do this by hand, I leave space between and now I can go, okay, so I did 1.72, 1.79 is going to go right here. So I have 2 1.79s and then I have my 1.72. I have another one of those. So I'm going to go up here and plug it in where it goes. And when I'm doing it by hand, I leave space so I can write it in. Okay. One thing to keep in mind too, as we go through this, is always have the units attached because 5 meters is different than 5 seconds. So we need to know what we're actually talking about always. It's just a good habit to be in. In physics, pretty much if there's a measurement, it should never not have a unit of measurement attached to the number. Never. Okay. And if it winds up without a unit, then you have to ask what happened. There's some exceptions, but those are rare. All right. So what we really wanted you to get into was the thinking about these is the mean, median, and mode are different ways of thinking about the average and when would median be correct, when would mode be correct, okay? So most of you did pretty good job on this, but this one, the average was 8 minutes, the median was 9 minutes, and then this question was really asking you what 3 or 4 pieces of data stand out as odd, and you really should have keyed in on the average is supposed to be 9, but we have as low as 2 minutes and as high as 15 and 12 minutes. So we have some extreme opposites that are fairly far apart from the 9 minutes. So what does that mean? Okay. But what does that mean? It could be, we could talk about how students are running, why some students are slower or faster. We could also talk about the numbers themselves and how this is actually a reasonable time. So we start actually looking at, are we looking at a reasonable time? Did somebody make an error in measurement? So we like to do mean, median, and mode so we can look at our numbers and go, do these numbers make sense? So that's the big question. Does what I'm doing make sense? Okay, same here. The mean or the average was 52 seconds. They're advertising 40 seconds. So you should have talked about how, well, they're saying it's that, which is the fastest time, but the average is actually 52 seconds. So you should have had some kind of discussion about what that means. Okay, a lot of you use that it's, thought this was 52 miles per hour. It's 52 seconds. That's the other reason, because we're comparing 52 seconds to 40 seconds. Okay. All right. And then on this one, this was interesting because you are so ingrained in a 100-point scale and using the mean for your grade. A lot of you didn't know how to answer this one. So something to think about is he's talking about the mode. So he's talking about 100%, 100%, 100%. So most of you said something like how Connor scored pretty low on the rest of his tests, okay? So what I would be interested to hear is what's the opposite argument? How could you argue that Connor is correct? And the answer is, if all of these tests were on the same topic, so all of them were on Newton's first law, and this was the last test, this was the second to last test, and so the 100% were at the end, well, maybe it's actually better to use the mode, okay? But that's not what we asked. So anyway, so that is our feedback for finding averages. If you have questions, please email me, come visit me during tutorials.